When my brother proposed to the woman who vanished from my life, he asked me to stand beside him, but I exposed their secret romance with one tagged picture, left the guests waiting, and sent him spiraling into ruin. When my brother Jake asked me to be his best man, I said yes immediately. We weren't competitive brothers who fought over everything. Growing up without our dad made us closer. Jake was the confident one who could own any room, but we always had each other's backs. So when he called last spring, excited about finding the one and wanting to settle down, I was genuinely happy for him. He'd had a string of relationships that never stuck, but this felt different. There was a light in his voice I hadn't heard before. That happiness lasted until I walked into their engagement party and saw her face. Natalie stood by the dessert table in a beautiful blue dress, laughing with Jake's coworker. Time stopped. I was back in college, 21, and stupidly in love with a girl who'd vanished from my life without explanation. We weren't some casual fling. Natalie and I dated 8 months senior year. I met her parents. She came home for Thanksgiving. We talked about moving in together after graduation. Then one March weekend, she stopped responding to texts. Complete radio silence. No explanation, no fight, nothing. I called 20 times, left desperate voicemails, even emailed. She'd ghosted me completely. Now, 5 years later, she was engaged to my brother. Our eyes met across the room. She froze mid-laugh, panic flashing before plastering on that fake smile I used to think was genuine. Later, she cornered me by the coat closet. I had no idea he was your brother when we started dating. Please don't say anything, it's complicated. After years of wondering what I'd done wrong, that's what she chose to say? No apology or explanation, just asking me to keep her secret. But here's what messed with my head. I'd posted pictures of us on social media in college. Jake had even commented on one, joking about my Halloween costume while she was dressed as Coraline. Either he'd forgotten completely, or he knew exactly who she was. That thought ate at me for weeks. Natalie started texting about wedding planning, then got personal, reminiscing about our old spots, sending photos of restaurants that reminded her of college. Each message felt like an emotional landmine. At the bachelor party, Jake's hammered friend leaned over and said, "Pretty crazy how Jake pulled this off, right? After everything between you and her." My blood drained. "What do you mean?" His eyes went wide. "Oh, poop. You don't know? Jake never told you?" Everything clicked. Jake had known the entire time. He deliberately pursued the girl who broke my heart. I drove home at 3 a.m., found old photos, and printed one of Natalie kissing my cheek at a college party. Her name tagged, date visible. I slid it under Jake's hotel door the morning of his wedding. He never showed up to the ceremony. Natalie kept checking her phone as guests waited over an hour. She left in her perfect dress, eyes completely dead. I felt satisfaction mixed with emptiness. Jake and I haven't spoken in 2 months. Mom asks why we're not talking. I say we need space. Last week, I got an email from Natalie. "Do you think if I hadn't left back then, we'd still be together?" I haven't responded, but I haven't deleted it either. I wish I could tell you it ended there, but it didn't. I stared at that email for 3 days before finally typing a response. Just one line: "We should talk in person." My hands shook as I hit send. Part of me wanted to delete it immediately, but another part needed answers after all these years. She replied within minutes, suggesting a coffee shop downtown, not one of our old places, somewhere neutral. I arrived 20 minutes early and sat in the corner booth, watching the door. When Natalie walked in, she looked exactly like she had at the engagement party, except the confidence was gone. She slid into the seat across from me, clutching her purse like a shield. We sat in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably 30 seconds. Finally, she spoke. "I know you must hate me." I shook my head. "I don't hate you. I just want to understand what happened." She took a deep breath, then started talking. The words came out in a rush, like she'd been holding them back for years. "Jake reached out to me first. About 6 months after we broke up, he found me on social media, said you'd told him I was just a mistake, that you'd moved on completely. He said you laughed about our relationship with your friends, called it practice for something real." My stomach dropped. "That's not true. I never said any of that. I know that now." Her voice cracked. "But back then, I believed him. He was so convincing, had all these details. He knew things about us, private things. I thought you must have told him everything." I gripped my coffee cup so hard I thought it might shatter. "So you just believed him? Without even asking me?" He showed me screenshots of texts. I don't know how he faked them, but they looked real. "You supposedly telling him how glad you were to be done with me, how I was too clingy, too serious." Tears started rolling down her cheeks. "I was 21 and heartbroken. When the person you love's brother shows you proof they never really cared, you believe it." The pieces started falling into place. Jake had always been good with technology, always knew how to manipulate situations. But this was beyond anything I'd imagined. "When did you realize he was lying?" I asked. "Not until we'd been dating for 4 months. He let it slip one night, mentioned something about our mom's birthday dinner. That's when I realized he was your brother Jake, not some random Jake from the city. I tried to break up with him that night." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through old messages. "Look at these. Every time I tried to leave, he'd convince me it would destroy any chance of you forgiving either of us. He said if I left him, he'd make sure you knew I'd been with him, make it look like I'd chosen him over you from the start." I read through the messages, each one more manipulative than the last. Jake had played us both like chess pieces, moving us exactly where he wanted. "But why?" I asked. "Why would he do this?" Natalie shrugged helplessly. "I've asked myself that 1,000 times. He said he fell for me when he saw our pictures, that he couldn't help himself, but I think it was more than that. I think he wanted what you had." We talked for 3 more hours. She told me about the engagement, how Jake had proposed in front of his whole office so she couldn't say no, how he'd already told everyone they were getting married before he even asked, how trapped she'd felt, knowing that leaving would mean potentially losing any chance of explaining things to me. The wedding planning was torture, she admitted. Every venue, every flower arrangement, every detail felt like a betrayal. But Jake kept saying once we were married, everything would be fine, that you'd accept it eventually. I thought about all those texts she'd sent during the planning, the photos of restaurants. "Were you trying to tell me something with those messages?" She nodded. "I kept hoping you'd see through it, that you'd realize something was wrong. But Jake monitored everything. He'd check my phone, my emails. The night before the wedding, He even took my phone away, said it was bad luck to talk to anyone. The bachelor party comment suddenly made sense. His friend knew, that's why he said what he did. Jake told a few people his version, made it sound like some romantic story, how he'd rescued me from a bad relationship with you. Most of them believed it, but Tommy always seemed suspicious. I think that's why he drank so much that night, felt guilty about keeping the secret. We left the coffee shop as they were closing. Standing on the sidewalk, neither of us knew what to say next. 5 years of lies and manipulation hung between us like a physical barrier. I need to show you something, Natalie said suddenly. She pulled out a small notebook from her purse. I started writing these the day after I stopped responding to you. I never sent them, but I needed to write them. The notebook was filled with letters to me. Apologies, explanations, declarations of love. Pages and pages of words she'd never been able to say. I flipped through them, seeing dates that corresponded with major moments. Our would-have-been anniversary, my birthday, the day she got engaged to Jake. I know it doesn't change anything, she said quietly, but I never stopped loving you, even when I thought you hated me, even when I was with him. It was always you. I handed the notebook back, my throat tight. I need time to process all of this. She nodded, understanding. I'm staying at my sister's place. Jake's been calling non-stop since the wedding, but I'm done. I'm filing for annulment. Turns out getting married under false pretenses is actually grounds for that. As she walked away, I stood there trying to reconcile everything I'd just learned. My brother, who I'd trusted my whole life, had orchestrated this entire thing. He'd stolen 5 years from both of us, built his relationship on a foundation of lies. I drove home in a daze, replaying every interaction with Jake over the past year. All those times he'd asked about my love life, pretending to be concerned. The way he'd casually mentioned finding someone special. How he'd specifically asked me to be his best man, knowing what it would do to me. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Jake, using someone else's phone. We need to talk. I can explain everything. I deleted it without responding. Then another came through. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I really did love her. That one made me laugh bitterly. Love? He didn't know what love was. Love wasn't manipulation and lies. Love wasn't stealing someone's happiness for your own gain. Mom called while I was sitting in my apartment, staring at old photos. Honey, what's going on with you and Jake? He came by here crying, saying you ruined his life. He won't tell me what happened. I wanted to tell her everything, but the words wouldn't come. How do you explain that one son deliberately destroyed the other's relationship? That he'd spent years building a lie? It's complicated, Mom. He did something unforgivable. Nothing's unforgivable between family, she said, and I could hear the worry in her voice. This is, I said quietly. Give me time, and I'll explain everything. Just please don't take his side without hearing mine first. She agreed reluctantly, and I hung up feeling even more drained. Jake had taken Natalie, but he'd also fractured our family. The ripple effects of his actions kept spreading. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the what-ifs. What if I'd confronted Jake earlier? What if I'd reached out to Natalie years ago? What if I'd never introduced them in the first place? Around 3 a.m., my phone lit up with an email. It was from Natalie, with the subject line, "One more thing." Inside was a single paragraph. I know you need time, and I respect that, but I want you to know that every single day for the past 5 years, I've thought about what we had. Jake might have stolen our past, but he doesn't get to steal our future too. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. I read it 5 times before finally closing my phone. The anger was still there, burning hot in my chest, but underneath it, something else was starting to grow. Not quite hope, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. The next morning, I woke up to 23 missed calls from Jake and twice as many texts. I blocked his number without reading any of them. Then I did something I should have done years ago. I opened up my laptop and started writing. Not to Jake, not to Natalie, but for myself. I needed to get it all out. Every emotion, every revelation, every moment of pain and confusion. As I typed, I realized something. Jake might have thought he was the puppet master, pulling all our strings, but he'd forgotten one crucial thing about puppets. Eventually, they cut their strings and walk away. And that's exactly what we were doing. The writing helped for about 10 minutes. Then my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Jake standing there, disheveled and holding a 6-pack of beer like we were about to watch a game together. His car was parked crooked in my driveway, one tire on the grass. I didn't open the door. He rang again, then knocked. "Come on, man. I know you're home. Your car's here." I stayed silent, watching him shift his weight from foot to foot. He set the beer down and pulled out his phone, probably calling me from yet another number. When I didn't answer, he started pacing my front porch. "This is ridiculous," he said loudly enough for me to hear through the door. "We're brothers. We talk things out." After 20 minutes, he finally left. I watched from my window as he drove away, noticing how he nearly clipped my mailbox on the way out. The beer remained on my porch like some twisted peace offering. I grabbed it and tossed it in the trash, then noticed my elderly neighbor Mrs. Chen watching from her garden. She waved hesitantly, probably wondering about the drama unfolding at my usually quiet house. I waved back and retreated inside. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Jake just left here. He's very upset. Can we all have dinner Sunday and work this out?" I typed and deleted 5 different responses before settling on, "Not ready for that yet." Her reply came instantly. "This is tearing our family apart." I set my phone aside and tried to focus on work emails, but concentration was impossible. Every few minutes, my mind drifted back to Natalie's notebook. All those unsent letters. 5 years of words she'd never been able to say. Around noon, my co-worker Ben knocked on my cubicle wall. "Hey, you okay? You've been staring at that same email for an hour." I minimized the screen. "Just dealing with some family stuff. Anything I can help with?" I almost laughed. How could anyone help with this mess? "Thanks, but I'll figure it out." Ben lingered, clearly wanting to say more, then patted my shoulder and left. I appreciated his concern, but wasn't ready to explain that my brother had systematically destroyed my relationship through elaborate manipulation. I left work early, claiming a headache. The drive home took me past the coffee shop where I'd met Natalie that morning. Part of me wanted to go back, to sit in that same booth and pretend the last 5 years hadn't happened. Instead, I went to the gym. Physical exhaustion seemed like the only way to quiet my racing thoughts. I ran on the treadmill until my legs legs burned, then moved to weights. Other regulars nodded in greeting, but I kept my earbuds in, not trusting myself to make normal conversation. In the locker room, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, probably Jake finding new ways to contact me. I blocked them all and noticed a text from an old college friend, Marcus. Hey man, saw on Facebook that Jake's wedding got called off. Everything okay? The news was already spreading. I wondered what story Jake was telling people. Knowing him, he'd probably painted himself as the victim somehow. I drove home to find Jake's beer gone from my porch and a note tucked under my door. Mom's handwriting. I stopped by, but you weren't home. Please call me. I'm worried about both of you. Inside, I made dinner without tasting it, then sat on my couch scrolling through old photos on my laptop. There were so many of Jake and me over the years. Birthday parties, graduation ceremonies, random Tuesday nights playing video games. In every photo, we looked like what we were supposed to be. Brothers who had each other's backs. I found one from 5 years ago, just a month after Natalie had disappeared from my life. Jake had taken me to a hockey game, said I needed to get out of my apartment. In the photo, I looked hollow-eyed, but was attempting a smile. Jake had his arm around my shoulders, grinning at the camera. Had he already been planning his next move then? When he bought those tickets and dragged me out, was he thinking about the messages he'd send to Natalie? My laptop dinged with an email. Jake, using what must have been his 10th different email address today. You can't avoid me forever. We live in the same city. We have the same mother. This is insane. I marked it as spam and kept scrolling through photos. There was one from Jake's college graduation where Natalie and I had driven up to surprise him. She'd made a congratulations sign, and we'd taken him to his favorite restaurant. Jake had hugged us both, said he was lucky to have such a great brother and future sister-in-law. The manipulation went deeper than I'd realized. Every memory felt tainted now. My phone rang. Mom again. This time I answered. Finally, she said, sounding exhausted. What is going on? Jake showed up here hammered in the middle of the day. He kept saying you destroyed his life over some girl. It's not just some girl, Mom. It's Natalie. Silence. Then, Natalie? Your college girlfriend Natalie? Yes. But how I don't understand. I took a deep breath. Jake knew who she was when he started dating her. He pursued her deliberately, told her lies about me to keep her from reaching out. He manipulated both of us for years. That's a serious accusation, Mom said carefully. Are you sure there isn't some misunderstanding? I have proof, Mom. Natalie showed me the messages. Jake admitted things to her. This wasn't some accident or coincidence. I heard her sink into a chair. Why would he do something like that? I don't know. Maybe you should ask him. I'm asking you. You're the one who's being rational right now. I almost laughed at that. Rational? I felt anything but rational. I need time to figure this out. Please don't push me to reconcile with him. Not yet. I'm not pushing. This is my worst nightmare. You boys are all I have. The guilt hit hard. Mom had raised us alone after Dad died, worked 2 jobs to keep us fed and clothed. The last thing she deserved was her sons tearing each other apart. I know, I said softly. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle. Can you at least promise me you'll be safe? Jake seemed unstable today. I'll be fine. He's just not used to consequences. We talked for a few more minutes about nothing important, both avoiding the elephant in the room. After hanging up, I felt worse than before. The collateral damage kept expanding. I tried to sleep, but gave up around midnight. Instead, I found myself researching annulments online, trying to understand the process Natalie had mentioned. The legal language made my head spin, but false pretenses seemed like solid grounds. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number, but this time the message made me freeze. It's Tommy, Jake's friend from the bachelor party. Can we talk? I stared at the text for a full minute before responding. About what? About what really happened. I know more than you think. We agreed to meet at a diner the next morning before work. I didn't sleep at all, wondering what Tommy knew and why he was reaching out now. The diner was mostly empty when I arrived. Tommy sat in a back booth, looking uncomfortable in his business suit. He stood when he saw me, shaking my hand awkwardly. Thanks for meeting me, he said as we sat down. I've been feeling guilty since the wedding. About what you said at the bachelor party. He nodded. I was hammered, but that's no excuse. I thought you knew. Jake made it sound like everyone was in on the joke. What joke? Tommy shifted uncomfortably. He used to brag about it when he was hammered. How he'd stolen your perfect girlfriend. How you had no idea. He'd show us old photos of you and Natalie, then photos of him with her. Said it was the ultimate win. My coffee tasted like acid, and everyone just went along with it. Most of the guys thought he was exaggerating. You know how Jake talks when he's hammered. But I knew Natalie from work events, and something always seemed off. She looked miserable most of the time. Why didn't anyone say anything? To who? Jake was our friend. You were just his brother we saw at group events. And honestly, most of us thought you must have known. It seemed impossible that you didn't. I pushed my untouched eggs around my plate. He specifically asked me to be his best man. Made this whole speech about brothers supporting each other. That's effed up, Tommy said quietly. Look, I'm not trying to make excuses, but I think Jake has some serious issues. The way he talked about you sometimes. It was like he was competing with someone who wasn't even in the race. What do you mean? He'd compare everything to you. If he got a promotion, he'd mention that you'd gotten one too. If he ran a 5K, he'd point out your marathon times. It was constant. We used to joke that he was more obsessed with you than his girlfriends. The picture was becoming clearer and more disturbing. So when he saw me with Natalie, he couldn't stand it. You had something he didn't, something he couldn't compete with or copy, so he took it. We sat in silence while the waitress refilled our coffee. Around us, the morning rush was starting. Normal people heading to normal jobs without their brothers destroying their lives. I'm sorry, Tommy said finally. I should have said something sooner. When he showed up at the hotel that morning, saw that photo you'd left. I've never seen him like that. He completely lost it. Threw things. Screamed about how you'd ruined everything. The hotel had to call security. I didn't know that part. Yeah, well, we kept it quiet. Paid for the damages and got him out of there. But honestly, I think you did the right thing. That wedding would have been built on lies. After Tommy left, I sat in my car processing everything. Jake's competitiveness had always been there, but I'd never seen it as malicious. I thought we'd outgrown the childhood rivalries when Dad died, when we'd had to depend on each other. My phone rang. Natalie. Hey, I answered, surprised by how normal my voice sounded. I'm sorry to bother you, she said quickly, but Jake's been calling my work. He told my boss we're having marriage problems and I'm unstable. I might lose my job. Anger flared hot and immediate. Are you serious? My boss pulled me aside this morning, asked if I needed to take some personal time to deal with my situation. Jake called him directly, said he was concerned about my mental state affecting my work performance. That's harassment. You need to document everything. I know, I'm keeping records, but I wanted to warn you, he might try something similar with your job. I thought about my boss, a no-nonsense woman who wouldn't tolerate personal drama affecting the workplace. Thanks for the heads up. How are you doing? I know this is all a lot. I just had coffee with Tommy. Turns out Jake's been bragging about this for years. Silence. Then, I'm so sorry for all of it. If I'd been stronger back then, if I'd reached out to you instead of believing him. Stop. This isn't your fault. Jake made his choices. I made choices too. Bad ones. You were manipulated. We both were. She sighed. I keep thinking about all the times I almost contacted you. Your birthday 2 years ago, I actually drove to your apartment. Sat outside for an hour trying to work up the courage to knock. Jake called while I was there, asking where I was. I panicked and left. The image of her sitting outside my apartment while I was inside, oblivious, made my chest tight. We can't change the past. No, but maybe. Never mind. You said you needed time. I'm respecting that. After we hung up, I went to work and immediately spoke with my boss about the situation. She listened without judgment, then assured me that any calls about my personal life would be disregarded. Your performance speaks for itself, she said. I don't listen to gossip. The day dragged on. I threw myself into projects, grateful for the distraction. But every time my phone buzzed, I tensed, wondering what Jake's next move would be. It came around 3 p.m. Our cousin Alexandra called, sounding confused. Hey, Jake just called me with some wild story about you trying to steal his wife. What's going on? I explained briefly, hitting the main points. Alexandra whistled low. That's messed up. I always thought something was off about how he talked about Natalie, like she was a trophy or something. What do you mean? At Christmas last year, he kept bringing up how he'd won the girlfriend lottery, but the way he said won was weird, like it was a competition. After Alexandra, I fielded calls from 2 aunts and an uncle. Jake was apparently calling every family member, spinning his version of events. I kept my explanations simple and factual, letting them draw their own conclusions. By evening, I was exhausted. I picked up takeout and headed home, only to find Jake's car in my driveway again. He was leaning against it, looking worse than he had that morning. I parked on the street and approached carefully. You need to leave. 5 minutes, he said. That's all I'm asking. 5 minutes to explain. There's nothing to explain. I know what you did. You know Natalie's version. You haven't heard mine. I laughed bitterly. Your version? Where you accidentally pursued my ex-girlfriend? Accidentally told her lies about me? Accidentally manipulated her into staying with you? It wasn't like that. He pushed off from the car, taking a step toward me. I held my ground. I fell in love with her. Real love, not some college fling. Don't. My voice came out harder than I'd ever heard it. Don't you dare minimize what Natalie and I had. What you had. You dated for 8 months in college. I was with her for over a year. I was building a life with her. Built on lies. Built on love. He was shouting now. She was happy with me. We were good together until you ruined it. I ruined it? You pursued my ex-girlfriend deliberately. You told her lies to keep her away from me. You trapped her in a relationship she tried to leave multiple times. She could have left anytime she wanted. Could she? When you threatened to ruin any chance of her explaining things to me? When you monitored her phone and emails? When you proposed in front of your entire office to trap her? His face went red. You don't know what you're talking about. I've seen the messages, Jake. Your own words condemning you. He stepped closer, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. Those messages don't tell the whole story. Then tell me. Make me understand why you did this. For a moment, his mask slipped. I saw something raw and ugly in his expression. Because you always had everything so easy. Everyone loved you without you even trying. In college, you found this perfect girl who adored you. Meanwhile, I couldn't keep a relationship for more than 3 months. So you stole mine? I didn't steal anything. She chose me. After you lied to her. After you manipulated her. That's not a choice, Jake. That's coercion. He swung at me. I saw it coming. Muscle memory from years of childhood scuffles. I stepped back, and his fist hit nothing but air. The momentum carried him forward, and he stumbled, catching himself on my car. Go home, I said quietly. Before you do something we'll both regret. I already did something I regret, he said, not looking at me. I regret asking you to be my best man. Should have known you'd find a way to ruin it. You ruined it yourself the day you decided to pursue Natalie. He straightened up, attempting dignity despite his swaying. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Don't come here again. I watched him drive away, then went inside and double-checked all my locks. My hands were shaking, adrenaline making me jittery. The brother I'd grown up with, who'd helped me through Dad's death, who'd been my best friend for most of my life, had just tried to punch me in my own driveway. I called Mom to let her know what happened, keeping my voice calm despite the chaos in my head. She listened in silence, then said she'd talk to Jake about getting help. Help for what? I asked. For whatever's driving this behavior. This isn't the son I raised. After hanging up, I sat in my dark living room, wondering if this was the son she'd raised, or if we'd all just been blind to who Jake really was. The signs had been there. The competitiveness, the need to one-up me, the string of failed relationships. We'd dismissed them as personality quirks, not warning signs. My phone lit up with a text from Natalie. Are you okay? Jake called me ranting about confronting you. I called her back. I'm fine. He showed up hammered and took a swing at me. Oh my God. Should you file a police report? And tell them what? My brother tried to drunkenly punch me over a girl? They'd laugh me out of the station. It's more than that, and you know it. She was right, but I couldn't bring myself to involve the police. Despite everything, some part of me still saw Jake as my little brother who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I've been thinking, Natalie said after a pause, about what you asked at the coffee shop. Why I believed him so easily back then. I waited, letting her gather her thoughts. I think part of me expected it to end. You were so perfect. Our relationship was so good. It felt too easy, like something had to go wrong. So when Jake showed up with those lies, it almost made sense. Of course you didn't really love me. Of course it was all too good to be true. That's not, I know that now. But at 21, with all my insecurities, it was easier to believe I wasn't worthy of that kind of love than to fight for it. We talked for another hour, filling in gaps recaps from the lost years. She told me about the therapy she'd started after realizing the truth about Jake, how she was working on the parts of herself that had made her susceptible to his manipulation. I told her about the relationships I'd tried to have since college, how they'd all felt hollow compared to what we'd had. I kept comparing everyone to you, I admitted. It wasn't fair to them, but I couldn't help it. Jake hated that, you know. He'd ask about your dating life constantly. When he heard you were single, he'd get this satisfied look, like he'd won something. The dysfunction ran so deep. How had I missed it for so long? After we hung up, I tried to sleep, but ended up staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction with Jake through this new lens. The bachelor party where he'd gotten hammered and made that toast about finally getting something right. The way he'd insisted I stand right next to him during the ceremony, said he needed his brother there. It all felt sinister now. My phone buzzed at 4 a.m. Another email from Jake, this time from his work account. You cost me everything. My fiancé, my reputation, my family. I hope you're happy with yourself. You always were the selfish one. I almost laughed at the projection. The selfish one? I'd supported him through every failure, celebrated every success, been there whenever he needed me, and how had he repaid that loyalty? By systematically destroying the best relationship I'd ever had. I deleted the email and tried to go back to sleep, but dawn was already creeping through my windows. Another sleepless night, courtesy of my brother's chaos. The next few days blurred together. Work, gym, dodging calls from extended family. Repeat. Jake's campaign to turn everyone against me intensified. He showed up at our aunt's house with tears and lies, posted vague statements on social media about betrayal and family loyalty, even contacted some of my friends, trying to get them on his side. Most people saw through it. My friend Ben called after Jake messaged him on LinkedIn, of all places. Dude, your brother seems unhinged. He sent me this long rant about you stealing his fiancé. Want me to block him? Please do. I'm sorry he's dragging you into this. No worries. Family drama happens, but maybe consider getting a restraining order. This feels like it's escalating. He was right. Jake's behavior was spiraling. The calls to Natalie's work had increased. He'd shown up at her sister's place at 2 a.m., demanding to talk. Her sister's husband had threatened to call the cops, which finally got Jake to leave. I met with a lawyer to understand my options. She listened to the whole story, taking notes with the increasingly concerned expression. This is stalking behavior, she said bluntly. Both you and Natalie should document everything. Save all messages, record any encounters if legal in your state, keep a log of incidents. If he continues escalating, you'll need evidence for a protective order. The idea of taking legal action against my brother made me sick, but what choice did I have? He wasn't backing down, wasn't accepting reality. If anything, the consequences were making him more desperate. That weekend, Mom invited me over for lunch. I knew it was a setup when I saw her good china out, the table set for 3. He's not coming, she said quickly when she saw my face. I promised, but we need to talk about this situation. I sat down warily. What's there to talk about? Jake destroyed my relationship through lies and manipulation. Now he's harassing both Natalie and me because he can't accept the consequences. I'm not defending what he did, Mom said carefully, but he's still my son, your brother. There has to be a way forward. He tried to punch me, Mom. He's calling my friends, Natalie's work. This isn't just a disagreement anymore. She aged 10 years in front of me. I know. I've tried talking to him, but he won't listen. He keeps saying you poisoned Natalie against him, that you planned this whole thing to hurt him. That's insane. I know that. You know that. But Jake, I think he's convinced himself it's true. It's easier than accepting what he did. We ate in heavy silence. The food tasted like cardboard, but I forced it down to make Mom happy. She'd lost weight since this all started, worry etching new lines on her face. What should I do? She asked finally. How do I help both my sons when one has hurt the other so badly? I didn't have an answer. How could I tell her to choose sides? But how could I pretend things would ever be normal again? Just don't enable him, I said finally. Don't make excuses or try to minimize what he did. He needs to face reality, even if it hurts. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry. If your father were here, don't. This isn't your fault. But part of me wondered if Dad would have seen the signs we'd missed. Would he have recognized Jake's toxic competitiveness and addressed it before it destroyed everything? I left Mom's house feeling worse than when I'd arrived. The guilt of putting her in this position warred with the anger at Jake for creating this mess. He'd shattered more than just my relationship with Natalie. He'd fractured our entire family. That night, Natalie called with news. The annulment paperwork is filed. My lawyer says it should be straightforward given the circumstances. How are you holding up? Better than expected. My therapist says I'm processing well. It helps that I never really loved him. I loved the idea of being safe from the truth, but not him. I'm glad you're in therapy. You should consider it too. This kind of betrayal, especially from family, it leaves marks. She was right. The constant anxiety, the sleepless nights, the way I tensed every time my phone rang, it was taking a toll. I'll think about it. I mean it. You deserve to heal from this too. After we hung up, I researched therapists in my area. It felt like admitting defeat somehow, like Jake had broken me. But maybe being broken was the first step to putting myself back together properly. The next morning, I woke to find my car keyed. Deep scratches spelled out traitor across the driver's side. I stood in my driveway, coffee cooling in my hand, staring at the damage. Mrs. Chen appeared at her fence. I saw him, she said quietly. Last night around midnight. I'm sorry, I should have called the police. It's okay. Did you recognize him? She nodded. Your brother. He seemed very upset. I took photos of the damage and filed a police report. The officer who came out was sympathetic but honest. Without video evidence, it's hard to prove. But this creates a paper trail if things escalate further. The violation felt deeper than just property damage. Jake had stood in my driveway in the middle of the night, angry enough to destroy my car. How much further would he go? I had security cameras installed that afternoon. The technician, picking up on my tension, assured me they were top of the line. Motion activated, night vision, sends alerts to your phone. You'll know if anyone comes near your property. It felt like preparing for war against my own brother. Tommy texted that evening. Heads up, Jake's been calling around trying to get the guys together. Says he wants to share his side of the story. Most of us aren't biting, but thought you should know. The desperation was escalating. Jake was was trying to build an army, create a narrative where he was the victim, but the truth has a way of surfacing, and most people could see through his lies. I met with a therapist I'd researched, Dr. Patricia Williams. Her office was calm and neutral, designed to put people at ease. I felt anything but ease as I explained the situation. Family betrayal is one of the deepest wounds, she said when I finished. We expect strangers might hurt us, but family is supposed to be safe. When that trust is broken, it shakes our fundamental understanding of the world. I keep replaying memories, looking for signs I missed. Was he always capable of this? Did I enable it somehow by not seeing it? Those are natural questions, but be careful not to blame yourself for someone else's choices. Your brother's actions were his own. We talked about coping strategies, about setting boundaries, about the grief of losing the brother I thought I had, because that's what this was, grief. The Jake I'd grown up with, who'd been my best friend and protector, either never existed or was gone forever. It's okay to mourn that loss, Dr. Williams said, even while protecting yourself from who he's become. I left feeling raw, but slightly clearer. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but at least I was walking it with purpose instead of stumbling in the dark. That clarity was tested immediately when I got home to find Mom's car in my driveway. She was sitting on my porch, looking older than I'd ever seen her. Jake's missing, she said without preamble. He didn't show up for work, isn't answering his phone. His apartment manager said he hasn't seen him in 2 days. My first thought was that this was another manipulation, Jake creating drama to force contact, but the genuine fear in Mom's eyes made me pause. Did you check hospitals, police stations? Everything. No sign of him. She grabbed my hand. I know things are bad between you, but you know him better than anyone. Where would he go? I thought about it. Jake had always been predictable in his unpredictability. When stressed, he'd seek comfort in familiar places. Did you check the cabin? Dad's old fishing cabin, 2 hours north. We'd spent summers there as kids, and Jake had always treated it like a sanctuary. I didn't think of that, Mom admitted. Could you go check? I'd go myself, but my night vision isn't what it used to be. Every instinct screamed that this was a bad idea, but the desperation in her voice, the genuine maternal fear, won out. I'll go, but I'm taking someone with me. I called Ben, who agreed immediately. Better safe than sorry, man. Jake's been acting erratic. We drove through the darkness, Ben keeping the conversation light, trying to distract me from the churning in my gut. The cabin looked exactly as I remembered, except for Jake's car parked haphazardly outside. Wait here, I told Ben. If something seems off, call the police. But I knew, even as I said it, that this confrontation had been inevitable. Everything since that engagement party had been leading here, to this moment of truth between brothers. I knocked on the cabin door. Jake? It's me. Mom's worried. The door opened, and Jake stood there looking like he'd aged a decade in a week. Unshaven, red-eyed, clothes wrinkled. The confident brother who could own any room was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Come to gloat? He asked, but there was no heat in it, just exhaustion. Come to make sure you're alive. Mom's going out of her mind. He laughed bitterly. Good old Mom, always worried about her boys. He stepped aside. Might as well come in. End this where it all started. The cabin was a mess. Empty bottles, scattered papers, photos spread across every surface. Photos of Natalie, of me, of us together as kids. It looked like the physical manifestation of Jake's mental state. This is where I decided, he said, gesturing at the chaos. Right here, 5 years ago. You brought her here for July 4th weekend, remember? I watched you together, saw how she looked at you, and I wanted it. So you took it. I earned it. The fire returned to his eyes. You think everything just falls into your lap, but I worked for her. I studied what you did wrong, figured out what she needed. I made her love me. You can't make someone love you through lies, Jake, can I? She said yes when I proposed. She was planning our wedding. If you hadn't interfered, if I hadn't shown you that photo, you'd have married a woman who was writing love letters to me in secret. Is that really what you wanted? He crumpled then, sinking into Dad's old armchair. I wanted what you had. Just once, I wanted to win. It wasn't a competition. It never was. Everything's a competition when you always lose. He looked up at me with eyes so lost I almost felt sorry for him. Do you know what it's like growing up in someone's shadow? You were smarter, more athletic, more likable. Even after Dad died, you handled it better. Everyone always said, why can't you be more like your brother? I never knew you felt that way, because you never had to think about it. You were the sun, and I was just the planet orbiting around you, until Natalie. She was my chance to have something you couldn't. She wasn't a something, Jake. She was a person, with her own feelings and choices. Choices I gave her. I saved her from pining after someone who'd forgotten her. I never forgot her, not for a single day. That seemed to break something in him. He started crying, ugly sobs that shook his whole body. I stood there, unsure whether to comfort him or maintain my distance. This was my brother, but he was also the man who'd stolen 5 years of my life. I've lost everything, he said between sobs. My fiancé, my brother, my family. Even my friends think I'm pathetic. You did this to yourself. I know. He looked up at me, snot and tears streaming down his face. Don't you think I know that? But I can't undo it. I can't make it right. So what's the point? The implication in his words chilled me. Jake, have you been thinking about hurting yourself? He shrugged, which was answer enough. I'm calling Mom, and probably a professional. You need help. I need my brother back. That's not possible right now. Maybe not ever. You broke something that can't be fixed with apologies or tears. I stepped outside to make the calls, filling Ben in quickly. He offered to drive back and get Mom while I stayed with Jake. As I waited, I thought about the complexity of love and hate, how they could exist simultaneously for the same person. Jake was my brother. That would never change. But he was also the architect of one of the deepest betrayals I'd ever experienced. Reconciliation felt impossible, but watching him fall apart felt wrong too. Mom arrived with the sunrise, taking in the scene with weary eyes. She hugged Jake, who broke down again in her arms. I stood apart, feeling like an intruder in my own family drama. We're getting you help, she told Jake firmly. Professional help. This has gone too far. He nodded against her shoulder, looking more like the scared little boy who used to hide during thunderstorms than the man who'd orchestrated such elaborate deception. As we prepared to leave, Jake caught my arm. I know you'll never forgive me, but I need you to know I did love her. In my own effed up way, I loved her. That wasn't love, Jake. Love doesn't manipulate or control. Love doesn't build itself on someone else's pain. He nodded, accepting the truth finally. Will you tell her I'm sorry? Not expecting forgiveness, just sorry. I didn't answer. Some messages weren't mine to carry. The drive back was silent, except for Mom's occasional directions to the treatment facility she'd researched. Jake checked himself in voluntarily, which was somehow both a relief and a fresh heartbreak. Watching my brother admit he needed psychological help felt like the final admission that our relationship as we'd known it was over. Ben drove me home, not asking questions, just being present. Good friends know when silence is more valuable than words. I found myself back at my laptop, staring at the screen. The urge to write returned, but this time I knew who I was writing to. I opened an email and typed Natalie's address. Jake's getting help, professional help. I wanted you to know so you can stop looking over your shoulder. I think this chapter is finally closing, for all of us. I don't know what comes next, but I hope it's something better than what came before. I hit send before I could overthink it, then closed my laptop and fell into the first real sleep I'd had in days. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more fallout to navigate, but for tonight, I could rest, knowing the truth was finally in the open, ugly and painful as it was. The puppet strings had been cut. Now, we all had to learn how to walk on our own. I slept for 14 hours straight. When I finally woke up, my phone showed 17 missed calls from various family members and 3 texts from Natalie. I ignored the family calls but opened her messages. Thank you for letting me know about Jake. I hope he gets the help he needs. Are you okay? I know that must have been hard. I'm here if you want to talk. I stared at the messages for a long time before typing back a simple, I'm okay, just processing. The next few days passed in a blur of normalcy that felt surreal after weeks of chaos. I went to work, hit the gym, made dinner. My coworkers noticed the change immediately. Ben commented that I looked like I'd finally gotten some sleep. My boss mentioned my productivity had improved. The security cameras I'd installed sent occasional alerts when delivery drivers approached, but Jake's car never appeared. Mom called every evening with updates from the treatment facility. Jake was participating in therapy, taking medication, following the program. She sounded hopeful, but exhausted. I listened without commenting much, still unable to process my feelings about his breakdown. A week after the cabin incident, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. This is Dr. Martinez from Riverside Treatment Center, a calm voice said. I'm calling about your brother Jake. He's listed you as family. My stomach clenched. Is he okay? He's stable and making progress. I'm calling because family therapy is often beneficial in cases like this. Would you be willing to participate in a session? I gripped the phone tighter. I don't think that's a good idea right now. I understand. The invitation remains open if you change your mind. Jake has expressed remorse about the situation between you two. Remorse doesn't undo 5 years of manipulation. No, it doesn't, but it can be a starting point for his recovery. Thank you for your time. After hanging up, I sat in my car outside the grocery store, watching normal people go about their normal lives. A couple argued about which cereal to buy. A mother juggled 3 kids in a shopping cart. An elderly man carefully selected apples. None of them had brothers who'd systematically destroyed their relationships. That evening, Natalie called. I got a letter from Jake today, from the treatment center. My jaw tightened. What did it say? I didn't open it. I wanted to ask you first. Should I read it? I thought about Jake's request at the cabin, asking me to tell her he was sorry. That's your choice, but maybe wait until you're with your therapist, in case it's triggering. Good idea. She paused. How are you doing with all this? Honestly, I don't know. Part of me is relieved he's getting help. Part of me is still furious, and part of me just feels empty. That makes sense. It's a lot to process. We talked for another hour, carefully avoiding any discussion of us or what might happen next. It felt like we were both afraid to disturb whatever fragile peace had settled over the situation. The following Monday, I returned to Dr. Williams for my second therapy session. She noticed my improved appearance immediately. You look more rested, she observed. I told her about Jake checking himself into treatment, about the family therapy request, about the strange emptiness I felt where my anger used to be. Anger can be energizing, she said. When it fades, it often leaves a void. What do you want to fill that space with? I didn't have an answer. For weeks, my life had revolved around the crisis with Jake. Now that he was contained, getting help, I felt adrift. Maybe that's your next step, Doctor, Williams suggested. Figuring out who you are without this conflict defining you. After therapy, I drove aimlessly through the city. I passed the coffee shop where I'd met Natalie, the gym where I'd tried to exhaust my rage, the office where I'd pretended everything was normal. Each place felt like a marker of the past few months' chaos. My phone rang. Mom, Jake's therapist says he's making real progress, she said without preamble. He's taking responsibility for his actions. That's good, I said, meaning it. Despite everything, I didn't want Jake to self-destruct. The facility is having a family day next weekend. I'm going. I'd like you to come too. I pulled into a parking lot, needing to focus on the conversation. Mom, I can't see him yet. Maybe not for a long time. I'm not asking you to forgive him, just to show up. Let him see that you're okay. Why does what he sees matter? Because he's still your brother. And somewhere under all that manipulation and jealousy is the boy who shared his Halloween candy with you and taught you to ride a bike. The memory hit unexpectedly hard. Jake, all of 7 years old, running beside my bike, promising he wouldn't let go until I was ready. He'd kept that promise, even when I'd been scared. I'll think about it, I said, which was more than I'd planned to offer. That night, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I tried watching TV, reading, even cleaning my apartment. Nothing held my attention. Finally, I grabbed my laptop and opened a blank document. But instead of writing about Jake or the whole mess, I found myself writing about other things. The promotion I'd been working toward before all this started. The hiking trip I'd planned but never taken. The cooking class I'd always wanted to try. Slowly, I began remembering who I'd been before becoming the brother who'd been betrayed. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Tommy stood at my door with coffee and pastries from a local bakery. Figured you might need these, he said, holding up the bags. I let him in, grateful for the distraction. We sat at my kitchen table, and he filled me in on the gossip from Jake's friend group. Most of the guys are pretty shocked, he said. Jake always seemed so together, finding out about what he did, then the breakdown. It's been a wake-up call for a lot of us. How so? We enabled him, you know? Laughed at his stories, ignored the red flags. Some of the guys are talking about being better friends, actually checking in with each other instead of just meeting up to drink. It was strange hearing about positive changes coming from such a negative situation, but maybe that's how life worked. Sometimes good things grew from the worst soil. Tommy left after an hour, but not before making me promise to join him for a normal, drama-free beer sometime soon. I agreed, realizing I'd isolated myself from everyone except family during this crisis. Wednesday, I threw myself into work with new energy. The promotion I'd been pursuing suddenly felt within reach again. My boss noticed the change, commenting on my renewed focus during our one-on-one meeting. Whatever was going on seems to be resolving, she said carefully. It is. Thanks for being patient with me. Good employees earn patience. Keep this up and we'll be having a different conversation at review time. That evening, I actually went to the gym at my normal time instead of hiding there during off hours. Several regulars welcomed me back, and I realized they'd noticed my erratic schedule. It felt good to slip back into routine, to be just another person working out instead of someone drowning in family drama. Thursday brought another call from Dr. Martinez. This time, I let it go to voicemail, but I listened to the message immediately after. Jake has written a letter he'd like to send you. Per our policy, we can hold it until you're ready to receive it, or destroy it if you prefer. Please let us know your preference. I stared at my phone for a long time before texting Mom. Tell the doctor to hold the letter. I'm not ready yet. Her response came quickly. That's fair. Thank you for not asking them to destroy it. That night, Natalie texted. I read Jake's letter with my therapist today. It was a lot, but I'm glad I read it. He admitted everything, took full responsibility. No excuses or manipulation, just acknowledgement of what he did. That's good, I replied, though part of me wondered if Jake's newfound honesty was just another form of manipulation. My therapist thinks I'm ready to move forward, really forward, not just surviving day to day. I stared at her text, heart pounding. What does that mean? I don't know yet, but I wanted you to know I'm working on myself too. This whole situation revealed things about me I need to address. Friday, I met with Dr. Williams again. We talked about the family day invitation, Jake's letter waiting for me, Natalie's text about moving forward. You seem overwhelmed by choices, she observed. For weeks, I was just reacting. Now I actually have to make decisions about what comes next. And that's scary? Terrifying. When I was angry, the path was clear. Stay away from Jake, protect myself, deal with the fallout. Now, I don't know what the right choice is. Maybe there isn't a single right choice. Maybe there are multiple paths, each with their own validity. We spent the rest of the session exploring what I actually wanted, separate from what others expected or needed from me. It was harder than I'd anticipated. I'd spent so long defining myself in relation to others, Jake's brother, Natalie's ex, Mom's son, that I'd lost track of just being myself. Saturday morning, I woke up with unusual clarity. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and made a list. Not a list of grievances or things to do, but a list of what I wanted my life to look like in 6 months. I wanted to be excelling at work again. I wanted to reconnect with friends I'd neglected. I wanted to take that hiking trip. I wanted to feel peace when I thought about Jake, even if forgiveness remained distant. And I wanted to know where things stood with Natalie, one way or another. The last item made me pick up my phone. Would you like to get coffee tomorrow? Somewhere new, just to talk. Her response came within minutes. Yes, how about that place on 5th Street, 2 p.m.? I agreed, then spent the rest of Saturday doing normal things. Laundry, grocery shopping, calling Marcus back about getting together. Each mundane task felt like reclaiming a piece of my life. That evening, Mom called. I know you haven't decided about family day, but I wanted you to know Jake's been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. The doctors say it's treatable with therapy and medication, but it's a long road. The diagnosis made sense in retrospect. The need for admiration, the lack of empathy, the exploitation of relationships. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it provided context. Thanks for telling me, I said. Are you coming tomorrow? No, but I hope it goes well for you. She sighed, but didn't push. We talked about other things. Her garden, a recipe she'd tried, anything but Jake. It felt like we were both learning to have conversations that didn't revolve around crisis. Sunday arrived gray and drizzly. I arrived at the coffee shop early, claiming a corner table with a view of the street. The place was modern but cozy, all exposed brick and local art. Neutral territory. Natalie walked in exactly on time, shaking rain from her umbrella. She looked different somehow. The haunted expression was gone, replaced by something calmer. She smiled when she saw me, a real smile, not the forced one from the engagement party. Hi, she said, sitting across from me. Hi. We ordered our drinks, making small talk about the weather and the coffee shop's ambiance. But once we had our cups, the real conversation began. I've been doing a lot of work in therapy, she started, about why I was vulnerable to Jake's manipulation, about my own insecurities and patterns. I nodded, encouraging her to continue. I realized I've always been afraid of being too much, too clingy, too serious, too emotional. So when Jake told me you thought those things, it confirmed my worst fears about myself. You were never too much. You were exactly right. She smiled sadly. I know that now, but I needed to learn to know it for myself, not just because you said so. We talked for 2 hours about growth and change, about the people we'd been and who we were becoming. She told me about her promotion at work, how standing up to Jake had given her confidence in other areas. I told her about my therapy sessions, about learning to separate my identity from my relationships. I'm not suggesting we pick up where we left off, she said eventually. Too much has happened. We're different people now. I know, I said, though part of me had hoped otherwise. But maybe we could get to know who we are now. Start fresh. See if there's something there. My heart raced. I'd like that. We agreed to take things slow. Coffee once a week. Texts if we felt like it. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people seeing if their paths might align again. As we prepared to leave, she touched my hand briefly. I'm glad Jake's getting help. Despite everything, I hope he finds peace. Me too, I said, surprised to realize I meant it. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, that felt like possibility rather than threat. Monday morning, I called Dr. Martinez's office. This is Jake's brother. I'd like to schedule a time to pick up his letter. Of course. Would you also reconsider participating in a family session? Not immediately, but perhaps in the future? Maybe. Let me read the letter first. I picked up the letter that afternoon, but didn't open it right away. Instead, I carried it around for 3 days, feeling its weight in my jacket pocket. Finally, Thursday evening, I sat down with a beer and opened the envelope. Jake's handwriting was shaky, but legible. The letter was long, detailed, and painfully honest. He wrote about his diagnosis, about understanding now how his need for validation had twisted into something destructive. He acknowledged every lie, every manipulation, without excuse or deflection. He didn't ask for forgiveness, just for me to know that he finally understood the magnitude of what he'd done. The last paragraph stuck with me. I know I destroyed the brother relationship we had. I can't undo that. But I'm working on becoming someone who could maybe, someday, be worthy of whatever relationship you might be willing to have, even if that's nothing at all. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my desk drawer. Then I called Mom. I read it, I said simply, and I'm not ready to see him. But tell Dr. Martinez I'll consider a family session, maybe in a month or two. That's more than I hoped for, Mom said, voice thick with emotion. Friday's therapy session with Dr. Williams focused on the letter and my decision to eventually participate in family therapy. What changed your mind? She asked. I realized I was giving Jake power over my life by actively avoiding him. Maybe facing him in a controlled environment will help me move forward. That's very insightful. But remember, you set the timeline. When you're ready, not when others think you should be. That weekend, I took a day trip to the mountains. Just me, my hiking boots, and a trail I'd been wanting to explore. The physical exertion felt good, but better was the mental clarity that came with it. Away from the city, from all the places tied to recent drama, I could think clearly. I thought about Jake, not with anger, but with something closer to pity. He'd spent so much energy trying to take what was mine that he'd never built anything of his own. His relationships, his happiness, even his sense of self had all been constructed around competition with me. I thought about Natalie, about our coffee date, about the possibility of starting fresh. We were both different people now, shaped by pain, but also by growth. Maybe that would make us stronger together, or maybe we'd discover we no longer fit. Either way, we'd know. I thought about Mom, carrying the weight of both sons' pain while trying to hold our fractured family together. She deserved peace too, but mostly, I thought about myself, who I was becoming in the aftermath of betrayal. I was less trusting, perhaps, but also more aware, less naive, but also more appreciative of genuine connections. The experience had burned away parts of me, but what remained felt more authentic. By the time I reached the summit, the sun was high and bright. I stood at the peak, looking out over valleys and distant cities, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Genuine contentment. Not happiness exactly. The wounds were still too fresh for that, but a sense that I'd survived something that could have destroyed me and was finding my way forward. My phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. Just a photo of a book she thought I'd like. Nothing heavy or demanding. I smiled and texted back a thumbs up and a mountain emoji. The hike down was easier, as descents often are. I made plans in my head. Real ones this time. The promotion I'd pursue more actively. The cooking class I'd finally sign up for. The conversation with Tommy about that normal beer. Small steps toward a life that wasn't defined by what Jake had done, but by what I chose to do next. Back in the city that evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called Marcus and actually followed through on plans to hang out. We met at a pool hall, and for 3 hours, I was just a guy playing pool with a friend, complaining about work and debating sports. Normal, blissfully normal. You seem better, Marcus said as we wrapped up. More like yourself. Getting there, I agreed. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Work during the week, where my renewed focus was noticed and appreciated. Coffee with Natalie on Sundays, each conversation revealing more about who we'd become. Therapy on Wednesdays, slowly unpacking years of dynamics I'd never questioned. Calls with Mom, who reported Jake's continued progress without pushing for reconciliation. The security cameras I'd installed became just another forgotten part of my home, no longer checked obsessively. The hypervigilance faded, replaced by normal caution. I even parked in my driveway again instead of the street. 6 weeks after reading Jake's letter, I finally told Dr. Martinez I was ready for a family session. We scheduled it for the following Saturday, with clear boundaries. Just 1 hour, with the therapist present, and I could leave at any time. The night before, I barely slept, but it wasn't the angry insomnia of before. This was nervous energy, like before a job interview or first date. I was choosing to face something difficult, not being forced into it. Saturday morning, I drove to the treatment facility with my hands steady on the wheel. The place was nicer than I'd expected, more like a retreat center than a hospital. Mom met me in the parking lot, hugging me tight. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. Inside, Dr. Martinez greeted us warmly and led us to a comfortable room with soft chairs arranged in a circle. Jake was already there, and the change in him was stark. He'd lost weight, his face gaunt but clear-eyed. He stood when we entered but didn't approach. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly, echoing Mom's words. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. Dr. Martinez guided the session expertly, keeping things focused and productive. Jake spoke about his treatment, his diagnosis, his understanding of how his disorder had affected his relationships. He didn't make excuses or seek sympathy, just laid out facts and acknowledged harm. When it was my turn to speak, I found words I didn't know I had. I told him about the betrayal, the ripple effects, the damage to our family, but I also told him I was glad he was getting help, that I didn't want him to suffer, even if I couldn't forgive him yet. "I don't know if we'll ever have a relationship again," I said finally, "but I hope you get better. For your own sake." Jake nodded, tears streaming down his face. "That's more than I deserve. Thank you." The session ended with no hugs or reconciliation, just a tentative acknowledgement that we were both trying to heal. Mom walked me to my car afterward, her own eyes red. "That was hard," she said. "Yeah, but necessary." She squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, of both of you, in different ways." I drove home feeling drained but oddly peaceful. The confrontation I'd dreaded for months was over, and I'd survived it. Jake was no longer the monster in my mind, but a flawed, sick person getting help. It didn't erase what he'd done. done, but it reframed it. That evening, Natalie called. How did it go? I told her about the session, about seeing Jake diminished but working on himself. That must have been surreal, she said. It was, but I'm glad I went. I needed to see him as he is now, not just as he was. You're brave, she said softly. Or stupid. Maybe both. They're not mutually exclusive. We laughed, and it felt good. Real good. Not forced or careful like our early conversations had been. Hey, I said impulsively. Would you like to go on an actual date? Dinner? Maybe a movie? Something more than coffee? The pause felt eternal before she answered. I'd love that. We made plans for the following Friday, and after hanging up, I sat in my apartment feeling something I hadn't experienced in so long I'd almost forgotten its name. Anticipation. Not dread, not anxiety, but genuine excitement about something good coming. The week passed quickly. Work was busy but manageable. I finally signed up for that cooking class. Tommy and I grabbed that normal beer and talked about everything except Jake. Each day felt like progress, small steps toward a life I was actively choosing. Friday arrived with perfect spring weather. I picked Natalie up at her sister's place, and she emerged wearing a sundress that made my heart skip. We went to a restaurant neither of us had been to before, creating new memories instead of revisiting old ones. Dinner was easy, comfortable. We talked about books, movies, travel plans. She laughed at my bad jokes, and I listened to her stories about work. For whole minutes at a time, I forgot about everything that had brought us to this point. After dinner, we walked through a nearby park, taking our time. The sun was setting, painting everything golden. I'm glad we're doing this, she said, linking her arm through mine. Me too, though I'm terrified I'll mess it up somehow. That's the thing about starting over, she said. We get to make new mistakes instead of repeating old ones. I laughed. That's oddly comforting. We ended up sitting on a bench, watching ducks paddle across a pond. It was peaceful in a way I'd forgotten existed. Can I ask you something? Natalie said. Always. Do you think you'll ever fully forgive Jake? I considered the question carefully. I don't know. Maybe forgiveness isn't the goal. Maybe it's just reaching a place where what he did doesn't define my life anymore. That sounds healthier than forced forgiveness. Dr. Williams would be proud. We sat in comfortable silence until the park lights came on. Then I drove her home, walking her to the door like we were teenagers. I had a wonderful time, she said. So did I. Could we do this again? I'd like that very much. She kissed my cheek, a brief touch that left me grinning like an idiot all the way home. The next morning, I woke up without checking my phone first thing. Instead, I made coffee and sat on my porch, watching the neighborhood wake up. Mrs. Chen waved from her garden, and I waved back, grateful for her quiet witness to the chaos and her continued normal presence. My phone eventually buzzed with a text from Mom. Jake's being released to outpatient treatment next week. He'll be staying at a halfway house, continuing therapy. Thought you should know. I stared at the message, waiting for the spike of anxiety or anger. It came, but muted, manageable. I texted back, thanks for telling me. Hope the transition goes smoothly. It wasn't forgiveness or acceptance, just acknowledgement, but it felt like progress. That afternoon, I met with Dr. Williams for what we'd decided would be our last regular session. We'd moved to monthly check-ins, a sign of how far I'd come. How are you feeling about Jake's release? She asked. Nervous, but not panicked. I trust he'll stay away, and if he doesn't, I know how to protect myself. And Natalie, we're taking it slow, but it feels right. Different from before, more intentional. You've done hard work these past months. You should be proud. I thought about the journey from that engagement party to now. The pain, the revelations, the slow rebuild. I am. Not proud of everything, but proud of surviving it. We scheduled a check-in for the following month, but I left feeling like I might not need it. The tools were there now. The self-awareness, the boundaries, the ability to process emotions without drowning in them. That evening, I pulled out the list I'd made weeks ago about what I wanted my life to look like. I was surprised to see I'd already made progress on most items. Work was going well, the promotion seeming likely. Friends were back in my life. The hiking had become a regular weekend activity. Things with Natalie were moving forward carefully but genuinely. Only the Jake situation remained unresolved, and maybe that was okay. Maybe some things didn't get tied up in neat bows. Maybe coexistence without contact was the best possible outcome. My phone rang. Natalie. I know we just saw each other yesterday, she said, but I wanted to hear your voice. I'm glad you called, I said, meaning it completely. We talked for an hour about nothing important, and it was perfect. Just two people building something new on ground that had been scorched but was showing signs of green. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness, thinking about second chances. Not the kind where you pretend the past didn't happen, but the kind where you acknowledge it and choose to move forward anyway. Jake would always be my brother, would always be the person who'd betrayed me in the deepest way, but he didn't have to be the main character in my story anymore. I went inside, made dinner using a recipe from my cooking class, and ate while watching a movie I'd been meaning to see. Normal, peaceful, mine. The life I was building one day at a time, one choice at a time. My phone sat silent on the counter, no longer a source of dread, but just a tool. The security cameras watched an empty driveway. The past was still there, would always be there, but it no longer held me hostage. I cleaned up the kitchen, thinking about the week ahead. Work projects to tackle, another date with Natalie planned, coffee with Mom where we'd talk about her garden and avoid heavy topics. Small things, normal things, but somehow precious now in a way they hadn't been before. Before bed, I opened my laptop and pulled up the document where I'd been writing, but instead of adding to the story of betrayal and pain, I opened a new file. This one would be different. This one would be about what came after, about rebuilding and choosing hope despite having every reason not to. I typed the first line, recovery isn't a straight line. Then I closed the laptop and went to bed, sleeping peacefully through the night. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and possibilities, but for tonight, I was exactly where I needed to be, moving forward, one imperfect step at a time. The next morning arrived with spring rain. I made breakfast, checked emails, did laundry, ordinary tasks that felt like small victories. Natalie texted a funny meme, and I laughed out loud in my empty apartment. Mom called to discuss Easter plans, carefully mentioning Jake would be spending it at the halfway house. I told her I'd come to dinner, grateful she wasn't pushing for more. Life went on. on. Not the life I'd planned before that engagement party, but maybe that was okay. Plans based on illusions rarely worked out anyway. This life, built on truth and hard-won wisdom, felt more solid despite its imperfections. I grabbed my gym bag and headed out into the rain. In the parking lot, I ran into a neighbor I'd been avoiding during the worst of the drama. "Hey, stranger," he said. "Haven't seen you around much." "Yeah, had some family stuff going on, but things are better now." "Glad to hear it. We should grab a beer sometime." "I'd like that," I said, meaning it. Small connections, rebuilt one at a time. It wasn't dramatic or profound, just life slowly returning to something resembling normal. A new normal, shaped by experience, but not defined by trauma. As I drove to the gym, I passed the coffee shop where everything had unraveled and then slowly begun to knit back together. I thought about stopping for coffee, but decided against it. Some places held too much weight. Better to find new spaces for the person I was becoming. The gym was crowded with weekend warriors. I found my rhythm on the treadmill, letting the physical effort clear my mind. Endorphins kicked in, that natural high that had kept me sane through the worst of it. A few regulars nodded in greeting, and I nodded back, grateful for these wordless connections. After my workout, I sat in my car checking messages. One from Tommy about plans next weekend. One from my boss about a Monday meeting. One from Natalie just saying, "Thinking of you." Each message a thread in the fabric of a life rebuilt. I drove home through familiar streets, no longer checking mirrors obsessively for Jake's car. The hypervigilance had faded, replaced by normal awareness. Progress measured in small freedoms. At home, I tackled cleaning projects I'd neglected during the crisis. Organizing closets, fixing a leaky faucet, small acts of care for my space. Each task completed felt like reclaiming territory from chaos. That evening, I called Marcus about getting together for the game next weekend. We made actual plans with specific times and places, not the vague, "we should hang out," that never materialized. Another small victory in the return to normal life. As night fell, I found myself thinking about forgiveness again. Not for Jake, that remained distant and uncertain, but forgiveness for myself, for not seeing the signs, for introducing them in the first place, for all the ways I'd blamed myself for his choices. Dr. Williams had been right. Self-forgiveness was often harder than forgiving others. I pulled out a notebook and wrote a letter I'd never send, not to Jake or Natalie or Mom, but to my past self, the one who'd trusted completely, who'd believed in the brother who never really existed. I thanked him for his faith in family, told him the betrayal wasn't his fault, assured him he'd survive what was coming. It felt silly, but also necessary. Another small ritual in the long process of healing. My phone buzzed. Natalie again. "Want to try that new breakfast place tomorrow?" "Absolutely." 10 a.m.? Perfect. Can't wait. I smiled at the exchange. Simple plans made without the weight of history. We were writing a new story now, one breakfast date at a time. Before bed, I stood at my window looking out at the quiet street. Somewhere in the city, Jake was in his halfway house, hopefully continuing his work. Mom was probably reading in bed, finding solace in novels. Natalie was at her sister's, maybe thinking about tomorrow too. We were all in our separate spaces, healing in our own ways. The family that had shattered might never fully mend, but each piece was finding its own shape. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. I turned off the lights and headed to bed. Tomorrow would bring breakfast with Natalie, Sunday dinner with Mom, another week of work and life and small steps forward. The dramatic chapters were closing, replaced by something quieter but more sustainable. In the darkness, I felt grateful, not for what had happened, but for surviving it, for the strength I'd found, the boundaries I'd learned to set, the people who'd stood by me, even for the hard lessons about trust and family and the complex nature of love. Sleep came easily now, no longer fought for or medicated, just natural exhaustion from a day fully lived. In the morning, I'd wake up and continue building this new life, imperfect but authentic. For tonight, that was more than enough. It was everything.